What is going on, ladies and gents? Welcome to Collectors Gone Digital. My name is Josh, and on today's episode, we are going to be recapping yet another David Yu interview. So while I'm recapping this one, another one of his popped up with a fairly new YouTube channel, it looked like. And then we've had several interviews with Dan pop up on LinkedIn. So if you guys are looking forward to more recaps, you can expect them. Now, I have broken down today's episode into 17 different points. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Alright, so first up, they talk about a major part of VeVe, and David here says that understanding the importance of collecting is that major part. Gee, I wonder why. Now, a big question that has been on the team's mind lately is how does VeVe attract new audiences? David says that there is a number of ways that they're doing this, and one of which is going to be the fashion industry. He says lots of brands in the industry have released their own collectibles, from Gucci to Louis Vuitton, Givenchy, there is a whole list. But on top of that, it also exposes VeVe to a new audience, and that is more females. He says they also introduced cell shading at New York Comic-Con, which provides a new style for collectors, but it also shows their artists and licensors VeVe's versatility. And then speaking of exactly that, another way that they're doing this is bridging the gap between physical and digital. And again, at New York Comic-Con, we saw a lot of phygital drops. We had the Funko collab, we had the Christian Louis collab, we had the Superior Spider-Man comic, and the Addiction series. Now, speaking of the Addiction series, David says that this was a test. So he says it was a way to see if VeVe can reach out to a new audience and help brands or artists promote something who aren't actually considered a major brand. Now, I think this proved to be a massive success because even if you use somebody like me as an example, I didn't know any of these artists prior to VeVe. VeVe was the one who exposed me to them. And, you know, you had Mondo, you had Vincent making comments about how the VeVe community just embraced them. We even heard comments about how, oh, it's a new series, there's no way they're going to sell 6,000 editions, or, you know, what happened? They sold out. So there was one reason and one reason only, and that was the VeVe community. So I think this proved to be a huge success. So moving on, they talked a little bit about Funko and the Marvel Mighties, and if there's a possibility for a collaboration in the future. David says that the series was originally designed as an entry-level collectible to help people start collecting on the app. Now, he doesn't actually say it in this video, he has said it in the past, but Mighties were priced to compete with the entry-level price of a Funko Pop. This is also going to be the reason why they heavily promote the series at conventions. And then in the future, they do look to expand the line. David says that the first product outside of the series was the comic cover that they gave to new signups at Comic-Con. Now, David's answer to the overall question of if there is a possible collaboration that could happen in the future, he had a very media-trained answer here. So David completely skipped around the answer. He said he'll take it into consideration, and to be honest, guys, I don't buy that for 1 second. He even said it himself in this interview that the Mighties have a very similar chibi style to the Funko Pops. So if I'm Funko, right, and I'm looking at VeVe and I'm looking at the best possible opportunities that we can capitalize on, I'm going right to the Mighties because, one, we have the resources already in place to be able to just build that line further, but two, we have an audience that already likes that style. So it's mutually beneficial for both companies because, one, VeVe's helping Funko come into the digital space, while Funko would simultaneously be helping VeVe enter the physical. So his answer almost made it seem like they hadn't thought about it before, but like I said, I don't buy that for 1 second. I'd be very surprised if this isn't something that the two companies haven't discussed before. Even with respect to the whole Funko Iron Man that they just did, if we speak on that just for a sec, we had a bunch of Funko channels talking about how that piece would not sell out. Right? It sold for 150 USD, most expensive in their line by far, and yet it's the only one to sell out in their line. If I think with respect to a chessboard, for example, them dropping that Funko Iron Man is like taking their pawn at the very beginning of the game and just moving it 1 square. I do truly believe that's the two companies dipping their toes in the water. Their main plan has to do with the chibi style, or, you know, I don't want to say Marvel Mighties, but like I said, if I'm in Funko shoes, that's the line that I'm going to right away. Now, speaking of the Funko Iron Man, this was their first eBay test. So for those who do not know, David has made the comments in the past about how he wants to eventually, or his vision is to eventually have VeVe collectibles sold on platforms like Amazon and eBay. So this is the first time that the team is actually tracking one of their pieces on eBay. So he says he's seen them reselling between $350 and $700. And he says that some are actually selling without the promo codes, so without the ability to redeem the digital version as well. So moving on, he talks a little bit about his vision. He says it's not set in stone, but he likes the idea of blind boxes where the collectible is signed, but the user doesn't know it's signed until it's actually opened. So other platforms actually offer experiences similar to this, where you can open the item or keep it closed. And if you keep it closed, it's considered sealed. Crypto Toys does something like this with their packaging. But he says that his biggest concern right now is ensuring an experience where the gamble still exists, right? So that feeling of you being able to buy a secret rare or you potentially selling it off in the package is still there. So next up, this was amazing to hear. VeVe is currently in discussions with CGC, so the company that ranks comics and collectible cards and things like that. And they're working to give VeVe Comics their own designated stamp of approval. That is amazing. So you can get your comic graded by CGC, and when you get it back, it'll actually have a special VeVe label. So not only does this create more credibility around VeVe, it shows the trust that CGC has in the company, and then also this is going to help expose VeVe to many more collectors in the physical space. Now, in terms of VeVe-Specific IP, they talk a little bit about the gold and silver logo. And David says pieces like these are a way for VeVe to control their own narrative. So a branded IP drop is obviously going to cost VeVe more money because some of the money generated from that drop goes to the actual brand owner. In this case, they don't have to pay any brand owner because the brand owner is VeVe. So they can reinvest all their earnings back into the program to ensure, and I quote David here, it continues forever. Now, he says the 500 logos are never going to be satisfactory for new users coming onto the platform, so they are likely going to have to introduce additional offerings to allow new fans to join the program in the future. Keeping in mind that these offerings are not going to be available on drops. From my understanding, these are all going to be items you have to get in person. Moving on, David talks a little bit about his experience now working with large gaming studios. So he says that VeVe has experience working with these studios, and product development is highly resource intensive. So this is something that he learned as a result. So a big thing that he's learned is that a lot of these gaming studios can't actually afford to deliver a product that isn't good enough to their audience, because that's how much time and money goes into developing it in the first place. And through this, David has learned how to make a product more perfect, something we'll touch on later on in the episode. Now, in terms of development times and people making the claim that they're not working on certain things or abandoning certain projects, David says that he understands the crypto space is rapidly evolving and fast-paced. If VeVe was to release everything all at once or too fast, the experience would just be poor. And when he said this, I thought about the example of, winning the lottery at a young age. You hear about these instances where, this 21-year-old gets all this money and then he buys all the cool cars and the houses and he lives up life at a young age. Well, what happens when that person gets to 60, right? They've experienced it all. Life gets boring. So David understands the importance of releasing things in stages, similar to how they're releasing the VeVe-verse in segments. Now, in terms of music, the first artist is going to be coming Q4 during the Christmas holidays. And this is where he talks a little bit about timing. In his exact words, he says it's all about timing and not overshadowing the existing program. Okay, so timing, key word there. But existing program, what he's talking about there is the existing drop. Kind of like a cooldown period. Because if VeVe were to drop a large brand too soon after a previous drop, what that can do now is take attention away from what just happened on the platform, or in other words, away from that brand or artist, right? Which VeVe obviously doesn't want. In fact, David actually says this happened at New York Comic Con. So each drop was bigger and better than the last, and all these drops happened over a short period of time. And so the result of this is that people just focused on the new shiny things. If I'm a smaller artist, for example, who's been in talks with VeVe for, maybe a year and a half or whatever, leading up to my initial drop on the platform, right? And then I get to the point where I actually drop my stuff, and right after I drop my stuff, having waited so long, they announce some big brand that just takes away from all the work that I just put in leading up to that drop time, then as an artist, I'm going to feel devalued. Now, in terms of VeVe's European fan base, European fans have felt left out. David says that this was never intended by VeVe, And that, you know, the result of this has really just been because they've been focused on areas with the most resources and highest likelihood of success. And the US obviously being the entertainment hub of the world. With them going over to the event in France, David wants to expose VeVe to more crypto users. He says when you expose a platform like VeVe to crypto whales, it's not hard to turn people like that who have deep pockets into collectors. They buy one thing and they want everything. So in order to draw the attention of these big whales, VeVe is currently working on showcasing big brands in France. They're talking with their sponsors, licensors, and artists. That way they have some big brands backing the platform. Kind of like Marvel over at Comic-Con. Now, David was asked what happens in the case of company closure. This is actually something we know about, but if you're newer to the community, I'm going to touch on it briefly here. Each brand, when they sign on with VeVe, they have the option to set up an external server to ensure that their collectibles live on. This is a condition in all their contracts. So in the event of a company closure, God forbid it, VeVe has plans to release their NFTs. Now, VeVe is apparently already in China, and I guess this would kind of make sense because they just introduced Mandarin. But the main problem apparently is that most phones over in Asia don't actually have Google. It's Huawei who's the main operator. So in order to do this successfully, VeVe is going to need to implement a new team to properly operate in the Asia region. A large part of this team would help with domestic languages to ensure a proper marketing approach. Now, speaking of marketing, in Asia, it's completely different. So it's not just as simple as, you know, social media ads. China doesn't actually have platforms like YouTube. So a lot of the resources that we would use to get our message across over here in the West, you cannot use in the East. Or Asia, I should say. Now, VeVe has been experimenting with TikTok to bridge the gap with Asia's market. This is interesting to me because I just talked about this on a WebV space. TikTok operates completely different in China. It pushes certifications, it pushes accomplishments, things of national culture. So I'm quite interested to see how successful VeVe is in pushing collectibles on TikTok in Asia. I can't actually speak on it too much because I don't know much of the stats involved here, but I would think that they would be more successful doing this in the Western markets. David also makes a point about data collection, and he says that in China, all data must be kept on a Chinese server. The partnership that they just had with Alibaba Cloud would help with this, but David says for only part of their gateway into Asia. There will be other things required outside of the resources being provided by Alibaba. Now, in terms of VeVe's approach, David says that VeVe's moves are becoming more polished. They don't want to be spending their resources on projects or building things that are not set up properly. They can't afford to be wasting time like that. He says they learn from the sidelines, then apply what they've learned by building relationships in the desired regions with the best providers. So being able to acquire resources through these providers to execute VeVe's overall roadmap. Now, there was a point in the conversation where a question was brought up asking if there's a temporary alternative that could be implemented to provide users or collectors on the platform with a way to use their MCP points. And I'll be honest with you, when I heard this question, I was like, why would the team... I mean, here, if people are complaining about how long the team is spending to release a certain feature, why would that same team now take away from the time that they're trying to spend to release that feature and spend it on developing a temporary solution that's only going to prolong what they're trying to release? In order to provide a temporary solution, the people who are currently working on the OUP and MCP that people are complaining is taking so long to come out would literally have to put that on pause in order to develop the quote-unquote temporary solution. So David says it himself, he wants to ensure that VeVe is building a robust product. Working on temporary bridges would take away from the team's time focused on larger things. And based off everything I just discussed, I couldn't agree more. You know what that honestly reminds me of? Like, I'm a car guy, and it reminds me of seeing all of these really, you know, cheap beater cars where somebody will try and suit the car up. And I'm looking at the car thinking the amount of parts you put into the car costs more than the vehicle itself. if you're a car person and you did all that because you just want to drive fast, why don't you just sacrifice a few extra years and then actually buy a nice fast car? That person taking the time, the money to put in all those parts on that crappy vehicle, it's a shorter term crappy solution to what that person actually wants to achieve long term. I hope the point I'm trying to make is clear. And last but not least, we have another OMI token question. Guys, the team has not abandoned the token. No disrespect to Dr. Stuff or Crypto Rain. I understand that they were asking questions based off what the community wanted to know, but regulations, timing, you know, those are the answers. And the reality is this: they're just answers that some people don't like hearing, but that doesn't mean that they're wrong. So David says that he spends his whole Sunday talking with VCs who hold large amounts of OMI. He spends a considerable amount of time on the token. He says they observe, digest the information, execute, and then gather feedback based off what they're doing. But again, going back to the whole point about regulations, you know, David and Dan, they need to be careful about what they say and what they do with the token, making sure that they don't put the company into a position where they're liable to a bunch of legal scrutiny. And I can tell you right now, if that happened, people would dislike that situation a hell of a lot more. David, of all people, is incentivized for the token to go up, right? He holds a large amount of tokens, as well as many other people on the team. The idea that the team abandons the token for it to go down to zero, I mean, pardon my language, but it's just asinine. Ladies and gents, that's going to conclude today's episode. I hope you enjoyed. Those are 17 points from David's recent interview, or one of them, should I say. Like I said, another one of his did pop up, so I will be looking to recap that, as well as some of the information that Dan was talking about over on LinkedIn. I haven't had a chance to look at all of it, but just based off some of the clips I saw, I do think I'm going to be making a video on that. I've also been spending a lot of time building out this membership program, and a large part of my time has been spent in the Discord. I've now finally reached a point where I'm spending a lot of my time in the Discord, and it's an experience that I'm really enjoying, so I am looking to roll that out this week. So for anybody who has been looking forward to it, you guys can expect that very soon. But if you guys enjoy the content, make sure to like and subscribe, comment down below what you want to see in a future episode, and as for next, I'll catch you then.